Her boyfriend said, "I love you," then texted me a picture I shouldn't have seen, her hand on his thigh, our kitchen in the background. I exhaled, hard and quiet. When I decided to return what I found, I aimed for the exact place that would hurt her pride the most. The photo hit like a thrown plate. Not loud at first, just a small, clean sound in the middle of ordinary life. And then everything around it cracked. Claire's hand. That stupid chipped black nail polish she always said made her feel dangerous. Nate's thigh. The corner of the island where I kept the fruit bowl. The tile I'd argued with her about and finally let her pick. My mouth went dry. My heart didn't explode. It recalibrated into something colder and clearer. I didn't answer Nate. I didn't call Claire. I sat in the office break room eating a sandwich I couldn't taste and watched the image over and over until the edges blurred. I thought of Emily, the way she'd squeezed my hand the night we said yes, the tiny domestic pictures we were layering together like cautious builders. Then I thought of Claire laughing at Emily's jokes, rearranging napkins for the rehearsal dinner, like this was practice for a life where every move earns applause. I went to Claire's that night because my instinct was still trained on family routines. She was the same. Wine, a playlist that always skewed a beat behind the room, a laugh given generously to fill empty seconds. Emily was there, soft and luminous in the light. I stared harder than I spoke. Claire chopped vegetables like an actress performing empathy, like she was practicing how to be the sister everyone mentions first at Thanksgiving. Nothing gave. Nothing cracked. Driving home, I had a choice. Rage, loud, immediate, messy, would have gratified something primitive. Smash a vase, shout in the driveway, call Emily and ruin the wedding right then. But Claire's world was built of smaller, sharper things. Reputations, impressions, favors held like currency. If I wanted to hurt where it actually counted, I had to be surgical. I had to make the things she prized, other people's trust, implode in public. So I made a plan. Not a fantasy of violence, but a spreadsheet. Names in columns, leverage as rows, relationships mapped like a subway chart I intended to short. I opened her logged-in browser. She'd borrowed my laptop a month ago. She'd forgotten to sign out, and started mining. Messages, pictures, throwaway jokes that weren't jokes, every casual cruelty she'd disguised as wit, every throwaway brag about using connections to smooth something her way. I copied timestamps, saved raw files, labeled folders. I felt sick, but not repentant. The sick had a purpose. I started small, an anonymous note to Marissa with a screenshot and the line, "You deserve to know." It landed like a seed. Marissa posted a vague story about people being two-faced. Claire liked it, like a reflex. Watching that like a lab rat press a lever made my stomach colder. Then I wrote an email to HR, not accusatory, clinical, evidence attached. Concern regarding conflict of interest, I wrote, because truth dressed as corporate phrasing would be harder to dismiss. I set a burner account to send the charity board a short packet. Dates, photos, one incontrovertible picture, no embellishment. Truth travels heavy and raw. People make the rest up for you. I didn't sleep much that week. The edges of my life blurred into methodical movements. Screenshot, timestamp, send. Screenshot, timestamp, send. Each message was a small, precise cut. Each silence from Claire was a pulse of confirmation that something was working. When she finally called, 6 missed calls, a desperate text pleading for a meet, I felt nothing theatrical. I met her at a cafe that smelled like overbrewed coffee and cinnamon. Her face was a map of shocks, not the theatrical kind you see in movies, but the slow, private collapse where muscles refuse to play along. "Someone's leaking things," she said, voice small. "Private things. Help me." I looked at her, the person who'd always matched energy to advantage, calibrated outfits to influence, now looked like a child caught with sticky hands. "Who would do this?" she asked, and I said nothing because I wanted her to taste the ambiguity. "I don't want to believe it's deliberate," she said. That line landed. Thin, stunned denial. I told her softly, "You don't get to decide what's private when you blur the lines. And you don't get to be surprised when people decide for you." She left without looking back. I watched her walk until she disappeared into the gray city. I felt for a moment like a surgeon who had already gone through with an operation she didn't consent to. And then I felt only the focused quiet of someone who had found the precise incision site. This was not a cry for vengeance. This was an arithmetic of consequence. I would not humiliate her with lies. I would expose her truth at the most reputationally costly places she loved to stand under lights. I planned where the leaks would land. Friends, then colleagues, then family. So gossip would amplify itself, turning small embers into a public inferno. Claire's currency was FaceTime, glossy volunteer nights, board photos, LinkedIn endorsements. She curated perception like it was a second wardrobe. If she had a weakness, it wasn't passion, it was vanity. She needed to be admired. So I weaponized the only thing she'd left carelessly around, her own words and pictures. I made a schedule. Monday, personal circle. Tuesday, close friends and a blogger from the alumni pages. Wednesday, HR and the CEO's assistant. Thursday, the charity board. Friday, family. I didn't flood, I timed. If you drop everything at once, it looks like a witch hunt. If you calibrate, it looks like a slow, painful revelation people accept as inevitable. Marissa flinched first. The anonymous screenshot arrived with just enough context to pry at the seam. A message about keeping a secret, a photo cropped to remove faces, but not handwriting. Marissa texted Claire a heart, then posted a cryptic story. Claire liked it. Reflexive, almost hoarse with denial. That like felt like a small assault to me. She was performing composure for a network already turning. At work, HR opened my concern with sterile curiosity. They did what HRs do. Investigate, whisper, note. I had included an email thread where Claire joked about leveraging a family tie to land a client. Harmless enough if read alone, damning if paired with the others. I watched company chatter pivot from expected promotion to pending review like slow dominoes. The CEO's assistant, who managed optics, was a predictable conduit. He read the packet, frowned, and put a call on his calendar. I was careful with family. The group chat was a tinderbox. I sent a message there too to the family email list, labeled for your awareness, with the picture of Claire's hand on Nate's thigh in a brief line. This was sent to me. I think you should know. Someone posted a question in the thread. Another replied with a shocked emoji. Mom texted me, "Is this true?" I read it and my thumb hovered. I answered, "I don't know everything. I just thought you should see it." Honesty that felt like a blade. Every send left me calmer and more hollow. Not the relieving hollow of closure, but the emptiness that follows decisions that change shapes of lives. I convinced myself my hand was forced. She'd made choices that required responses. Yet each ping of a notification, Marissa deleting photos, the firm removing Claire from the leadership page, sounded like a stone dropping into a well I'd dug. On the morning Claire was due to give the presentation that would clinch her promotion, I woke before dawn with a quietness in my chest I hadn't felt since childhood. It had the shape of determination, but thinner, colder. I rehearsed nothing. The movements were automatic now. Send, confirm, wait. I showed up to the hotel because I wanted to see the theater of consequences. The ballroom smelled like lemon and polished wood. Investors exchanged business cards like currency. Claire took the stage with a smile I used to think was unnecessary and now found chilling. She spoke about projections and partnerships with the practiced cadence of someone who'd practiced it until it was armor. Midway through, the CEO's assistant got the packet I'd addressed. He glanced down, then leaned into the CEO. The CEO's face smoothed into professionalism, but his eyes softened in that way men's faces do when something small inside them collapses. He asked Claire to pause. He handed her a tablet. She read slowly, the way people read bad news meant for someone else. Her breath shortened. Her slides kept moving like a train with a missing conductor. When they escorted her off stage, people murmured and looked away the way they do at a funeral procession. I left before she found me. Outside, the cold hit like clarity. My phone lit up with messages I didn't want. Emily asking if I'd spoken to Claire. Nate sending one-line texts that tasted like guilt. Mom begging for answers. I didn't reply. The silence felt like an ally. I told myself that a fractured public life is reparable. Reputational wounds scar slower and leave traces. That was the calculus. I also told myself that Emily would understand, that she'd see the architecture of betrayal and stand beside me. But people are porous to shame in different ways. Some draw closer, some recoil, and you never know which until you test them. When the first article that evening appeared on the local alumni bulletin, a thin, factual piece about recent internal review for senior associate Claire Johnson, my stomach folded. The piece didn't have lurid detail. It didn't need it. The shadow of implication is more effective than any explicit statement. People love to fill the blank with the worst plausible story. Claire called me in the small hours, voice raw enough to break wood. "They pulled me from the panel," she said. "They suggested a leave. Jake, please, help me. Tell them it's a mistake." Her words were not demands. They were pleas from someone who believed if she asked for help long enough, help would arrive. I considered lying. I considered saying I'd stand up and defend her, telling the truth in a way that might restore what I'd broken. But the image of her hand on Nate's leg kept opening and closing in my mind like a trapdoor. I couldn't pretend ignorance. I pictured Emily finding that image months later in a folder I hadn't cleared. I pictured wedding vows exchanged and the slow poison of secrets. I pictured loyalty as a brittle thing. Once cracked, it reflects in 100 jagged ways. So I told the truth. "I saw it," I said. "I have evidence." Silence. Then, "Why would you do this?" she asked, the question that carried a history of being allowed off the hook, because she always had an angle to charm her way out. "Because you made choices without considering the fallout," I told her. "Because this wasn't just about you." When word got out to the charity board, they acted as charities do when their image is threatened. Swift and decisive. A suspension announced in soft corporate prose. A friend texted, "They're posting that she's under review for conduct inconsistent with our values." I watched the feed where last month she'd been smiling in a ribbon-cutting photo, now silently prune her. Volunteer coordinators untagged her. A dinner invitation vanished. People online started to speculate. Internet rumor slaked its thirst on half-truths. Friends at work whispered, and colleagues who had envied Claire's effortless rise began to circle like opportunists smelling weakness. She lost the small privileges first, the mentoring lunches, the invitations to panels, the casual trust of coworkers who now avoided the elevator with her. Then larger things closed. Meetings she'd led were reassigned. Projects vanished from her calendar like footprints from a beach swept by tide. I felt it all, but differently. To them, I had been the quiet sibling. To me, I had been the executor of justice. But justice tastes like ash when it costs you what you love. Emily texted twice that day and then called once. Voice brittle. "I need to think," she said. This is a lot." Those words arrived like a frost. They didn't accuse. They froze. Her absence was a new kind of punishment, one that fell slower and more private than public shaming. I am not naive about morality. I'm painfully aware of how fragile it is to live by your own gauge. I had engineered punishment and imagined a satisfying balance. Betrayal answered with social consequence. Pride taken down a notch. Instead, I found a different ledger opening up, debts I hadn't considered. Mom cried on the phone. She won't answer. She won't get out of bed. I said the things you say to soothe a parent. She'll recover, she'll learn, she'll grow. The words tasted like policy. Then came the night of the office party where Claire should have been toasted. Instead, the CEO announced an internal investigation and suggested she step back. Someone from HR made an awkward joke about boundaries. I watched Claire stand at the periphery, a planet without orbit, eyes bright and animal-like. She saw me for the first time that evening, and in that look there was a rawness. Not the practiced calm she'd used 1,000 times, but something unvarnished and human. Hurt, fear, humiliation. I wanted, absurdly, to reach out and touch her shoulder and tell her it wasn't only me who had been hurt, but I didn't. My hand stayed in my pocket. My moral muscles had been exercised to a new stiffness. I had to test them with every breath. The collapse didn't happen in a single thunderclap. It spread like rot under paint, unseen, then visible, then undeniable. Within 2 weeks, Claire's promotion was withdrawn. Her name disappeared from the leadership pipeline with an email that read like a weather report. The charity asked her to step aside until further notice. Friends stopped inviting her to dinners. A few messages I'd expected to be furious turned out to be quiet refusals. We need distance. It's messy. I can't be involved. The people who'd circulated around her like prop makers moved away when the stage went dark. When I saw her at Mom's one wet afternoon, she was small in a way I'd never seen. Shoulders hunched, sneakers scuffed, hair in an unflattering knot. We packed old photo albums in silence. Once she paused with a box in her arms and said flatly, "You wanted this." No accusation, no frisked attempt to dramatize. Just a statement like a measurement. "Did I want this?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. "You made sure," she said. Her voice had the brittle clarity of glass. I thought about every act that led us here. I had wanted to punish an invasion, to cut off a filthy root. But I hadn't accounted for the roots under the soil. The parents, the mutual friends, the wedding plans, the months of shared holidays. Those things don't live in isolation. You pull a root and you disturb the rest of the tree. Emily didn't come back. She moved into a small apartment with boxes where framed pictures used to be. When she called, the questions she asked were careful, like gauze. Did you have proof? Was it intentional? Do you think Claire will change? I couldn't answer easily. The ends of those questions bent toward things I couldn't measure. Future trust, the possibility of forgiveness, whether a life one destroys can be rebuilt the same. In the quiet that followed the social storm, I began to feel the consequences as a physical ache in the center of myself. It wasn't regret for being caught, it was something more intimate, recognition. I had crossed a line that mirrored what I despised, manipulating people's lives as if they were chess pieces. Claire had used relationships as lubricant for ambition. I had used truth as an instrument. One night, weeks after the fallout, Claire came by my apartment. She didn't ask to be let in. She stood on the stoop, and for a long while we just looked at each other, like two people who had survived a small war. When she finally spoke, it was in a voice thinner than I'd heard before. "What do you want, Jake?" she asked. "I wanted you to stop," I said. "I wanted honesty. I wanted Emily to be safe." It sounded clumsy, like a man trying to explain why he set a house on fire. She laughed then, a sound without humor. "You burned the house, Jake. You burned it." Her eyes were furious and exhausted both. "And you didn't even keep the flames from touching you." That line lodged in me afterward. I had imagined a clean severing, a precise correction. Instead, I had raised familiar ground and found nothing left to steward. I had engineered a consequence that left a hollow where relationships used to be. People who mattered drifted away, not in dramatic confrontations, but in the slow, inevitable erosion of trust. The wedding ended, not with a shouting match, but with polite, necessary silence. Invitations went unsent. Family gatherings shifted to avoid the fissure. There is a moment after you act where the world waits for your explanation, and you realize there's no narrative neat enough to make it right. You can offer apologies, you can try to rebuild. But apologies are mortar, and not every crack accepts new mortar. Claire eventually found a quieter job in a smaller firm, where no one knew her carefully constructed biography. She learned humility the hard way. I learned a different lesson, that being the arbiter of someone else's punishment is not the same as finding peace. Sometimes at night, I think about the photo. Not the scandal it began, but the small, ordinary objects in it. The fruit bowl, the chipped tile, the way light fell across that kitchen like it always had, oblivious. I see Emily's hand in mine in memory and wonder, which of us was keeping the bridge intact? I wanted justice. I wanted to hurt where it would scar. I got something more honest and emptier, the realization that revenge becomes a mirror, and often you don't like the person reflecting back. The bridge burned. The ash smelled faintly of choices. I stood on the bank and watched the charred beams float away. In the space left behind, I had time to count the cost. It was there, in that stunned quiet, where I finally understood the worst part. I had achieved what I set out to do, and the victory was a vacancy that would never be full again.